Really do a glass of Chardonnay.
Yeah, I'm going to hold off on the grog until afterwards.
Yeah.
Then I'll,
Probably the right call. I've had one glass of wine. I think that'll probably do now. Mind you, I'm saying
then I
50 words. So.
certainly have something.
Yeah.
So, hey guys. Are you doing the live? Are you doing it live? Are you?
Yeah, it should be live now. Is it working, John?
You send me the link.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Yeah. Oh, we got 38 people watching.
Beautiful.
It was supposed to be live streamed by Chris.
Yeah, Chris De Bruyne is also going to be live streaming, so there should be 2, I think. In case mine fails, there should be a backup.
Yeah.
God willing. I remember that phrase from Ukraine now. Yeah.
Like if Katarina comes in the room, you're gonna shock her gentle bones.
Is that the link?
Yeah, so I'll send you the YouTube link because it's probably a little bit easier to watch than on Twitter.
My dad will jump
Yeah.
on this daily,
Yes.
Actually, I'll shoot it to you. Do you mind sending it to Mum and all that?
I'll do that. I'm just not sure if he will read it.
I'm sure he does. If he doesn't, that's his fault.
Send it to me.
Did you send it by
A signal?
Did you see that last thing that I sent you?
oh no, we're not. Is that that's your Twitter? That's not the YouTube.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, YouTube's gone through now.
I just want to point out how aligned you guys are, even without discussing it. You both wear the same color pants.
Well,
Good stuff.
let's use the correct word for it. Zeleny.
Yeah.
Zeleny is green.
Excellent. I've sent it to the crew group.
Alright. To Chris.
And Rob, what's
mate.
everyone? What's the vision for questions? Do you want me up there?
I assume so,
Picking-
yeah. People
and
just chuck questions
I'll
at us,
say,
and if
right.
they're really, really dumb, we'll make a joke, and if they're really good, we'll answer.
Sure, and then
Yeah.
they'll just direct it to them. Yeah, sure. And we've got somebody with a microphone in the
I think so.
right.
So
Have a think.
what time will this end again? Because I've got to.
No idea, mate. When are you flying back?
Yeah, my flight's at 9:30, so I've got to be pretty strict.
We've got a couch if you need to crash.
Yeah. Worst case.
9:30 is going to be.
It's
It's going to be impossible. You're not going to make that flight. Yeah, you're not going to
Not
make
yet.
that trip.
Not yet.
We thought you're gonna be going, for a drink afterwards.
I know. The only problem is I've got work tomorrow morning, but
It's a problem.
I know.
You can see how that
You have a
is.
job?
in the
I do.
way.
Unfortunately, I do. I'm trying to make the YouTube thing my full time.
Speaking of which, your boss owes me fun.
I know. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm going to try. Well, I'm literally working tomorrow, so I'll try to get him to do it. I've asked him like 50 times. It's tough sometimes. He's a bit like me. He's got ADHD.
I'm seeing how he dresses, mate. I think
Yeah.
that's probably a fair bet.
Let me double check that it's actually working.
Oh.
Right, thanks, Dylan.
Okay. Should all work. Shut up.
Sure.
You got a pink copy of
Yeah. John, I just need you to make sure
I just noticed it.
my personal hotspot doesn't go out and then the stream doesn't go down. Let me know.
Yeah, sure,
if
sure.
that happens, let me know.
Yeah, that works.
And how loud is this?
It works.
No, I mean on the.
Oh, okay, that's pretty good actually. Loud. That's pretty
Hold
loud.
on, hold on. It's pretty long.
Hey guys,
Still hasn't.
How are you?
good to see you guys.
Okay, that's not too loud. That's all right.
Like,
Samuel.
Yeah,
Samuel,
bit of-
right?
bit of-
Yeah, that's right.
I remember you from Twitter.
Oh, very good.
I'm sort of. He's a patriot.
Oh, Samuel
Oh,
Barrett.
Yeah, he's a
yeah,
patriot.
John Mayer.
We'll have to recruit him.
Yeah, we'll have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also, how many Twitter bloggers do you think are coming here?
Probably 50% of mine.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get a packed house.
Oh, yeah.
Problem is they had to email John's team
Yeah.
to register, right?
I think you just basically walk in.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a registration. We don't have an armed guard at the
I'm
door
just going to
anyway.
get up and wait.
I would say that in my experience, the registration process didn't require you to email anybody,
Yes.
but maybe it's possible because I was coming to it from Drew's Twitter.
Oh, I'm glad that there's some Drew Twitter people here.
And you did have to register with Eventbrite,
Yes.
give all your details, and then they had this sort of thing where they made you download their app.
Oh, that's
So,
dreadful.
which was a bit kind of, I have to say that I almost thought, oh, why are we doing that? I don't have any tickets. Will I actually bother going? And of course, when you haven't paid any money,
Yes.
you also you may get a lot of people that bought tickets who don't pay much less.
Yeah.
In the event that we don't
Yeah.
have someone in the audience,
And there was no real indicator that you could just turn up.
I think I'm up here.
I'm sure.
All I'm saying is, although
Go
people
around.
could just turn up, they've got to get past three rather formidable looking policemen.
Yeah.
Oh right. Yeah. Okay. I forgot about that point.
They're not just going to wander.
Sure.
This is like the second time I've ever been in this building.
I've never been in Houston for a while.
Last time I was in here was when the PRC hacked the place and I was kicking them out.
Oh right. That's cool.
Back when I was in PAA.
That's cool.
I can't believe people build like stuff. Like, it's like software.
Adrian, Sam.
Try it again.
No, she's not with me.
You have to know, Bob in the game.
Yeah, I do.
Yes, we know Barclay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is like a young conservative in Queensland, Barclay.
Yeah. You're from Queensland?
No, I'm not, but I just know.
Oh, yeah.
There's a good question on the YouTube live stream. It says, "Is Drew Sunni or Shia?" Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Good stuff. I am reading the comments.
You'd be Shia. I mean, you'd have
I think it'd be 12 because that's the closest to Christianity.
Okay.
Oh, Chris, how you going?
Yeah, man.
How you going? Your live stream's probably going to be a lot better than mine, Chris.
He does look a little bit more prepared.
Mine's like literally just that.
Yeah. Let's see if we can do a bit better.
Should I just simulcast yours?
If you want. Oh, careful. Isn't that I don't know, a Nazi channel, like a Nazi vibe?
Chris,
Yeah.
Try to simulcast his. It probably will look better.
people in the comments just ask you to move.
The camera, yeah, because the
Camera from
camera's
the
angle's
angle.
not the best.
Because
He's on an
you're
angle.
tweet.
Yeah.
Like, put it in front of you.
How are we doing questions from the live stream? Because there are more people watching on the live
Oh, right.
That's a good question. Wait,
Actually, that's a good question.
that sounds like a you problem, aren't you?
stream.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
It doesn't sound like a me problem.
Okay, we can take some questions on the live stream. That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
But is the live stream on your Twitter? Why don't I
It's
pull that
it's
up
on my
phone?
YouTube. But Chris is going to look a lot better, so I'm thinking maybe I'm just going to simulcast
We're
his.
supposed to start at 7?
Oh, is it a 7 o'clock start?
What? I have no idea.
It was supposed to be 6:45.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
we've got
great.
time.
Let me look up Drew Pavlu.
I think realistically, I'm going to lose my flight.
Yeah, dude, there's no way you're making it fine.
Just,
Yeah,
if
9:35 was the last one they
just
had.
crash it out. Just like you've
Yeah.
got
Ukraine debate, New South Wales Parliament live. Here we go.
Cool. Yeah, Chris's does look a lot better than mine.
well, he actually looks like he prepared.
Yeah. Well, I'm just that's my camera. Like, I don't have a camera.
That's the camera you brought.
Yeah, the same one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might literally just. Yeah.
No, just use that. It's fine. People can hear it. It'll look
Yeah.
better when we're there.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Good point.
Like, and you're not going to capture an empty room.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Good point. Great point. Great
There
point.
is like your
Yeah.
shot is not strictly dominant. Thing
Yeah,
Like that one.
yeah. I hope we do get some more people on.
Yeah, I
Oh,
know.
we're still doing better than Sky News.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. That is a good point.
I am Sky News now.
You
Yeah,
are.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
not here, so guess what? I get
You're the
the
equivalent.
Where's Kieran?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's I've known him for years. Yes.
Where is this chat? Oh, Chris wants a group chat set up.
It's really funny that
Drew says he's I'm up it.
Does he mean a chat for the stream? Because that's you can comment on the stream itself, I think.
Oh, no. He just wants a group chat.
Oh right. Okay.
He just wants to give us feedback.
Oh okay, cool. Okay.
Because
Oh,
he's
that'd be
coming
good.
on the next stream.
Oh cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Which one's Chris?
Sheehan. You haven't met him. It's-
Yeah. Oh, there's a comment by Robert Barwick. Guess
Oh,
what?
No.
Please pass on my regards to Drew and Robert before they start and say I hope Robert is protecting Drew's emails now.
Tell Robert Barwick to eat 10,000 dicks.
Yeah. Robert Barwick. Yeah, good on you, mate. Oh, John. Hey, mate. How you going? Good to see you.
Good to meet you,
How you
mate.
going? How are you?
Hey Ross.
John,
He's a proper
G'day, John Maynard.
Oh, John, how are you, mate? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, hey, mate. How you going? Good to see you, mate.
Is there anyone just ready to put John back in the bus?
No, I just know him on Twitter.
Oh Drew, by the way, I'm the guy behind Lack of Taste.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
The guy who writes for Colette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
I have a full-time job. I have a normal job.
We'll have to properly chat as well at some point.
Yeah.
It feels weird to be on your turn instead of mine.
Who's
though.
worked at?
Well, oh, you mean in Australia?
So,
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't say this.
Rob
but-
first, then you,
This is
then
the first
Drew,
one.
then Ross.
Okay, cool.
I feel like Sydney though.
Yeah, it is good.
It is a nice city. It's got proper light. I think once we get done with Keith, we might move here. Well, we were looking at Spain.
Yes.
You've got yours all smacked up, I guess.
Yeah. Mainly talking about her song and the Donbass and what we saw.
I mean, it's
Exactly. Yeah, talking about it just like what compelled Russia to do that other than yeah, literally.
and we're on like a record. We haven't shut out once.
Absolutely. Isn't it funny that Robert Barwick tuned in and he goes, "Oh, I hope Robert's protecting Drew's emails now."
Okay.
He's a proper reptile. Though.
Yeah, he is literally a lizard, and he can hear us say that. You're a lizard, Robert.
Hello.
There you go, mate. Let's see.
You don't have much hair on you, do you? I don't expect you to. 21st. I got an e-pen.
Hey, mate, good to see you again. We'll have to have a proper chat. Chris.
Rob speaking first. Oh, wait, you keep getting this one wrong.
Highly technical setup.
That works, though. It works.
So if
Well, we're going to be speaking up there, so would you like us to take it up there?
great.
Yeah.
Great. It's organised debate.
I am unfortunately still a student, yes. Law, finishing the last semester of my arts this semester.
I'm the moderator. How's it working? Is it?
My main passion is obviously in political media and politics and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I really
Technical prowess in
hope
action.
to,
Better you than me.
to go into political media and stuff like that. And I guess that's where my real passion is. And I do that probably most of the time anyway, more than my studies in fact. So yeah. Yeah, born in the Gold Coast, and then Brisbane.
Slowly.
Yeah, okay.
So, what time did you reckon this would end up again? 8. Okay. Fingers crossed, because I've got a flight at 9.
You're in
We're
just
not
to
sure.
get him on, all right? It's not gonna happen.
Drew, I just reckon there's literally zero
Oh.
chance you're getting on.
I've got work in the morning. That's the only problem.
Just get the 6 a.m. out to Brisbane.
Maybe, yeah, we'll see.
Like, I used
Yeah,
to do 3 city days when I was at BA.
I might
Go
end
to
up-
Melbourne, go to Canberra.
Might end up.
Like, we've got a great system.
Yeah, that's true. I might.
There's actual planes in this country.
We do have planes. That's a good point. In Ukraine, we had to drive it.
Yeah, there's no the ones that are up there. You don't want to see.
I reckon everyone should move to the front so that we have it more packed in.
We libertarians, so people can sit wherever they want.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point, actually.
You're welcome to come to the front, but don't feel under pressure from the libertarians.
The authoritarians. Tell you what to do.
Well said.
I mean, if it was at the Kremlin, you'd be forced to sit at the front.
Yeah, so true.
If it was
Well,
the
it's only the
Kremlin,
better ways.
you would want to sit at the front.
Only the better ways.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Is our Marshal, so you're saying we need some more at the front?
Yeah.
Okay,
Otherwise, I got.
good boy,
I'm just going to reserve that one if that's all right, fellas.
good boy, yeah.
This
Thank
probably
you.
looks better on the
Very
Chris.
kind
It looks
of
better
you.
on the Chris thing.
I'm really excited to be honest with you.
Okay, good.
I see a rogue Mark Latham has arrived.
Yeah, very good.
Wow.
Yeah,
Not
good.
every day you get to say that.
Still wearing the same orange tie from that day.
Hello, Mark. How you going?
Sure.
Great man.
Good to see you.
Mark.
Oh, yeah, Drew. Yeah,
Good to meet you, sir. Good to meet you.
we'd like to have a fair fight.
Yeah.
Sorry, in front of you. Oh, sorry, mate. Do you mind if I steal that one? It was motivating thing.
Okay. It's up here for you.
Sorry, I just actually meant the seat because I missed it at the bell. If that's all right. So I'll jump
This
across
is
one.
right up.
Sorry.
Better view.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah, do you want to load another 5?
Yeah, wait for another 5, I think.
6:45.
6:45. So we'll go 5
Oh,
minutes.
right.
Talk of the building. Everyone wants to hear this. Debate.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
I read this in last night that when Gorbachev was in, who was Bush's Secretary of State?
Which one?
James Baker.
James Baker. James Baker had a conversation with Gorbachev along the lines of, "We'll give a commitment to you never to go anywhere near NATO, never to go anywhere near you."
Yeah.
On the basis that
Yes.
I did. I have.
Yes,
in your moment of humiliation,
Yeah. not 1 inch east.
yeah,
Yeah.
never to do anything aggressive in or against you,
I haven't seen your YouTube, but
which was the perfect
Actual deal,
Yeah.
good deal.
So that's why
Also,
and the communism was still alive, but teetering.
Twitter.
So these discussions preceded the fall of the Berlin Wall. We thought sort of
So you follow some
structure there'd be,
Twitter.
then NATO stuffed it up.
I'm not Australians on Twitter. No.
We'll get to
Go
that.
into that in detail.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get.
No,
How we
no,
want
of course
it.
not. But if you boil it down to it,
It's a mythical Baker complex.
Yeah.
most
Because
most
James
of these
Baker
Twitter
decides every independent country
pieces
is
of like
fine.
leftists and they're way more crazier than the other leftists in other countries.
You reckon
So I reckon.
What's that in particular, like in how to
Yeah, they're very
It's
dogmatic,
true.
but also they just tell you to be.
That's a great system. I would have learned from Chris.
Yeah.
That is a great system.
Yeah, see how they post sides tackle.
Yeah, it's not
And the
used.
demon
But
like
I know-
That's brilliant, Chris. Well done.
built into the focus.
Yeah, you don't need- they would have released
Yeah.
9/11, this book was saying
Well
Putin
said.
and Bush Jr. were very, very close. And Bush actually thought he had an ally which affects Soviets,
Yeah.
Russia as well.
So that's all the stuff.
I don't know where he.
And Clinton had some decent relationship.
Yeah.
This has not always been.
That's a great.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
He became President Trump. So the American left, so he became a proxy for hate Trump. He was hating Putin.
Yeah, I think maybe just Dark Abundance. It's basically developed by
A lot of
There are.
meetings.
So there's a little history in it.
There are.
Good
So it's
guys.
just like
Yeah, yeah. The covers.
How'd this come about?
Basically like.
Me and Drew have been chatting. We've never met before, but we chatted on Twitter. And I said, look, respect your opinion, but I think you're wrong on Ukraine. We should have.
Oh, it was a great idea to set this up at New South Wales Parliament House. I was very excited to do it.
It's basically.
Better than arguing about it.
Not that I'm like paying.
That was a good one. That was pretty interesting. I enjoyed watching it.
Well, I thought it was going to be a debate. It was basically just like an absolute interrogation.
It was an interrogation. Yeah, it was quite harsh. You're the only bloke in the country who went to both the March for Australia and the Gaza rally on the Sydney Bridge.
Oh, she's furious.
Right on both fronts.
Good idea.
Right on both fronts.
You are the
True
one
libertarian.
in a man.
it's
Well, if you're concerned about mass migration, what's causing all the refugees? All the bombs that you guys support in the Middle East. All the wars that you
Mate, look
drop
at
all those bombs across the Middle East. You say, why
Mate,
the West
mate,
got all
the-
those refugees?
the majority-
Why has the West got all
the
those
majority of our
refugees?
migration program is India,
yeah,
China.
lots of bombs in India.
Yeah, exactly. The majority of our migration program is India, China.
Well, our migration policy is pretty good, but Western Europe,
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Western Europe is bad.
Yeah, having
And-
been
and
in
most of
university when those wars started.
But
yeah,
most of those refugees which are causing problems in Western Europe are from Syria, Libya, Afghanistan.
and Russia had nothing to do
Iraq.
with any of that.
When did Russia
NATO
invade
did.
Afghanistan again?
Oh, NATO did it.
I seem to remember the Soviets were
The
in there at
Soviet
some
Union
point.
is a very separate beast to Russia.
Yeah.
So true.
No weapons being sighted.
What was Putin's role in the Soviet Union again?
It was a low-ranking, the equivalent of the CIA.
Proletariat.
Yeah, proletariat.
He was a
A humble
supporter.
farmer.
Humble farmer, we'll say.
His main role was a supporter of Glasnost. He's been on the right side of history on this major occasion.
You reckon Putin was a liberal reformer?
He was a reformer.
Very
He
much.
was a supporter of the mayor of
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg,
Who was so corrupt.
who was promoting Glasnost.
Yeah.
And
Feel free to make that
Putin
argument.
could see. Putin could
But
see.
the reality is that like there were a lot of people who pretended to be reformers, but it was kind of like the KGB deep state, and that was like Putin.
All right. Well, we might
Oh,
put
yeah,
off the
we'll-
debate pre-debate.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's debate. Who is more to blame for the war in Ukraine? Or perhaps more precisely, is Russia to blame for the war in Ukraine? My name is John Mainland. I'm an associate with the National Conservative Institute of Australia and president of the Surfers Paradise Institute for Law Reform. Myself.
I was checking the audio. He's fine.
Look, tonight is obviously a hotly contested debate. We all believe strongly that ideas of all kinds should be placed in front of the citizen such that they can make up their own mind. Some ideas are obviously still too far, such as should we have a female speaker, but we are broadly in favour of the principle. Tonight, each speech will go for 9 minutes. At 8 minutes, there will be a ding from a sort of digital bell that we have embedded in the system here. I also have a bell from Officeworks. At 9 minutes, there will be 2 dings, and at 9 minutes 15, I will start dinging continuously. At 10 minutes, I'm calling the cops, at which point we're hoping that it'll wrap up quite quickly. This debate will not have a voting system at the end. There isn't going to be a winner per se, given the gravity of what's being discussed. This is about seeking to convince you, the individual. Then there will be questions. So we're going to transition from a debate to a sort of general forum. We would ask you, please don't give a speech during the question and that you keep your question civil in tone. We're also going to have a live stream question, so we'll be going between the physical and the virtual on the questions. Anyway, I'll now move on to introducing our speakers. Our first speaker tonight will be Robert Potter, arguing that Russia is to blame for the war in Ukraine. Robert is managing partner at Cyber Activities Group. He's formerly with DFAT, BAE Systems, and the Washington Post. Robert is an advisor to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defence and has a knighthood from the Vatican. Our second speaker tonight is John Ruddock.
Me too.
John is a member of the New South Wales Legislative Council for the Libertarian Party. In 2015, he authored Make the Liberal Party Great Again, If Only We Could.
How's that going?
Yeah. Give us time. He appears regularly in print and on screen for The Spectator, The Australian and Sky News, amongst others. Our third speaker tonight is Drew Pavlu. Drew is a human rights activist and former political candidate for the Drew Pavlu Democratic Alliance, which I must admit I was party secretary of. Drew needed 500,000 votes to get a seat in the Australian Senate. We were just shy, 495,000 votes shy to be precise.
It's very illustrious.
But he is known globally for his campaign against the Chinese Communist Party and has featured in the New York Times and an Australian Senate inquiry, amongst other weird and wonderful places. Our final speaker of the night is Ross Cameron. Ross is president of the New South Wales Libertarian Party, formerly the member for Parramatta in the Australian House of Representatives, and has had a storied extra-parliamentary career in business and media. I just want to say, prior to this kicking off, that it is a real privilege and a pleasure, such a beautiful evening in such a beautiful city, to be able to attend a civic event of this nature. And I think we're all acutely aware that many people around the world are not so lucky. whoever is responsible for the war in Ukraine, it certainly isn't the young men at the front, nor their families, nor the millions of civilians whose lives have been directly impacted by this war. We pray for them and we pray for peace. Anyway, Mr. Potter, I now welcome you to the stage. I'm going to press play when you're ready to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for being overdressed. I actually left all of my fatigues in Kyiv. Otherwise, I would have been wearing my patches. But I did wear the right color. I've lived in Ukraine since 2022. I've been on the streets where the first missiles fell. I've walked through areas that were liberated. And I've seen what Russia does. I've seen the faces of parents who buried their children because someone in the Kremlin decided that their borders and identity could be erased by force. I'm here tonight because there is a story being told about this war, a story that says it was inevitable, that NATO provoked it, that America caused it, that history itself pushed Russia to do what it did. That story is a lie. Wars don't just happen because of history. They happen because folks in power make bad decisions. Putin's trying to sell the line that NATO made him do it. It's the same as saying that a woman in a short skirt was asking for trouble, and it's a bloody disgrace. Now, I'll level with you. The West stuffed up too. We should have backed Ukraine much earlier. We should have put the hard word on Moscow long before 2022 and the full-scale invasion. But missing this chance to stop a burglar doesn't make you the criminal. The blame belongs to the man who broke into the house, not to the people who left the window open. The war began when Russia chose conquest over coexistence, when Moscow decided that the future of its neighbors was not up to them to decide. Now we're going to hear about NATO expansion, about broken promises and Western hypocrisy. They'll speak of security dilemmas and balance of power politics, as if tanks crossing borders were the result of an academic theory instead of imperial ambition. But I've lived in the country they are talking about, and I can tell you what I've seen. I've seen that NATO did not conquer Eastern Europe. These people stopped looking east for their leadership. Never mind that Russia invaded Ukraine 5 times before NATO even existed, that the first law against the Ukrainian language was passed in the 1860s when President Lincoln was the president of the United States, not President Bush in 91. My partner is from Eastern Ukraine. She grew up speaking Russian. But that doesn't make her Russian any more than me speaking English makes me British. They'll tell you that in 2014, there was a coup backed by the West. Here's the truth. Millions of Ukrainians didn't need the CIA to tell them where Maidan Square is. Their president broke his promises, stole their future, and shot them when they protested. Parliament voted him out after he fled, and there's been 2 elections since. That's not a coup. That's people taking back their country. The scary thing, it was the 3rd time in 20 years that they had to do it. Russia interfered in at least 5 Ukrainian elections before they even started talking about NATO. They were rigging votes in 2004 and poisoning the leader of the opposition who became the president. And they were hacking the election commission in 2014. Nations ran towards NATO because they remembered the last time Russia came knocking on their borders. Hungary 56, Czechoslovakia 68, Georgia 2008, Crimea 2014. They knew the pattern. When Moscow grows restless, its neighbors' borders vanish. They'll say it was NATO said that it wouldn't move east. Who broke the promise? Well, the first shot was fired by the Russians. They promised in 91 to respect the domestic politics of their neighbors. And they broke it almost immediately. Instead, in every country in Europe, and maybe some in Australia, you'll find people taking money from Russia. These guys who say they have a right to sovereignty free from NATO want a free hand when it comes to bribing politicians in Germany. They didn't give up their dreams of empire, but the Germans did. That's why wars don't happen in Poland at the moment. So Poland joined, the Baltic states joined, the Czechs joined, not because NATO pulled them in, but because Russia pushed them away. And here's the truth that Russia cannot bear. The nations that escaped its orbit did not just find security and safety, they found freedom and prosperity. With strong economies, they grew richer, freer, and stronger. Meanwhile, every country which has remained under Moscow's shadow has stayed poor, exploited, afraid. Ask anyone whether they'd rather live in Prague or Minsk. The answer is pretty obvious to anyone and everyone who isn't taking any money. Russia is too poor, too weak, and too out of ideas to remain an empire for much longer. That's not NATO aggression. That's just the gravity of better ideas. Democracy, the rule of law, and the chance to build a better life are what the West is offering. And Putin sees war and violence as a substitute for having a plan to fix any of this economic stagnation. He's trying to trade old Soviet tanks as a way of making up for the fact that no one's buying his bullshit anymore. Hypocrisy doesn't launch missiles. NATO doesn't launch missiles into Moscow. One crime doesn't give license to another. Just because America stuffed up in Iraq and Afghanistan doesn't mean that Russia gets a free kick to erase a European country with North Korean soldiers standing beside them. Security dilemmas, they explain fear. They do not explain double tap missiles hitting apartment blocks with the second missile hitting the ambulances. These are not accidents of history. They are the choices made by men in power. And if Ukraine gave everything Russia wants to Putin, everyone knows that on day 2, Moldova's next. Ukraine did not invade Russia. NATO did not invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. And it did so not because it fears NATO's weapons, but its neighbors choosing a future beyond Moscow's cronies. Minsk is one heart attack away from a revolution. Georgia's already in one. And you're not going to solve the gravity of an economic prosperity with tanks and using up the old Soviet ammunition supplies. Because when you look at the map of Europe today, you see Poland becoming wealthier than the United Kingdom. And people in Ukraine still have familial ties to Russia. They don't hate Russians until they started killing them. But they don't want to live in an economic backwater anymore. And everyone knows that if you stay under Russia's rule, that's what you get. It was not destiny. It was not inevitable that this war would happen. It was a decision by Putin to trade military power in exchange for having a real plan to maintain the economy of the former Soviet Union. And the responsibility for that lies with the people in Russia who were responsible for that economic stagnation and decline. Not with Brussels, not with Washington, and certainly not in NATO headquarters. The blame lies where the first missile was launched in Moscow. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see if I can sort this out. I think I just pressed play there.
Sorry, that's still in there. Will G, can you hear something? Sorry, that is. I see. Yeah. So I just drag it back to the start. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Bark.
Thank you. 2 years ago, President Zelensky addressed the Canadian Parliament. As the House Speaker introduced Zelensky, he said, "We have in the chamber today a Ukrainian-Canadian war veteran from the Second World War who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops even today at the age of 98. The Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, gave this veteran a standing ovation. But there was a little problem. A Ukrainian fighting the Russians in World War II? That means he was fighting with the Nazis, and it soon turned out this guy was part of the Waffen SS. This astounding pig ignorance of history is sadly representative of the Western world's perception of the Ukraine war. Ukraine and Russia both bear some responsibility for this dreadful war, but the primary responsibility belongs with NATO, and in particular the weapons manufacturers who have cheered it on. To soberly appreciate any conflict, we need to embrace strategic empathy. We need to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of the other side to understand their motives. The only alternative is a simplistic one. The other side is evil, we're holy, so we must engage in a holy war against those baddies. In my view, Russia has been remarkably restrained since the end of the Cold War, and we should be grateful for that restraint. So let's dispel with the historical ignorance. In 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia. They launched a civil war, killing 10 million and impoverishing everyone else. But it gets worse. These Marxist revolutionaries were hell-bent on global revolution. When the dust settled on the aftermath of World War II, communists had taken over 1/3 of the world. Communism went on to kill 100 million people and enslave many more. NATO, led by the Americans, deftly contained communism and then ended up winning the Cold War without firing a shot. Most will remember the dramatic footage of the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. At that point, however, the Soviet Union was still standing. The following year, 1990, the German people wanted to unite East and West Germany. That was tricky. The Soviets had more troops in East Germany than any of their other satellites, but the German people very much wanted reunification. There were dozens of meetings between President Bush, President Gorbachev, and many of their senior officials about the German question. It was agreed that, yes, Germany could reunite and it could also be part of NATO on the very strict proviso that NATO not move 1 inch east. Everyone agreed. The Russians, the Germans, the French, the English. The following year in 1991, Boris Yeltsin stood atop a tank in Moscow, defied the Politburo and brought down the Soviet Union. Fantastic. Free enterprise and democracy were introduced to Russia. Now, it was an extremely difficult transition from a Soviet economy to a free economy, but the trajectory would soon be up. At that point, NATO should have been disbanded. NATO had been created to stop Soviet expansion, and now the Soviets didn't exist, so why NATO? Well, of course, a big bureaucracy will always hunt for new ways to justify itself. By the mid-1990s, talk began around NATO expanding east towards Russia. This was unnecessary and provocative. In the past 200 years, Russia has been invaded from the West on 4 occasions. The Napoleonic Wars, the Crimean War, World War I and World War II. In World War II, 1 in 12 Russians were killed. So yeah, Russia is understandably a little paranoid when the world's most advanced military alliance starts debating whether to expand towards Russia. The foreign policy school that won the Cold War were the realists. George Kennan said in 1946, look, let's not confront the Soviets and risk World War III, let's contain them. And then the internal contradictions will collapse it. That's how the West won. The neocons weren't called the neocons at the time, but they were always about confrontation, like Vietnam. The neocons saw the fall of the Soviet Union as their unipolar moment. They openly talked about full spectrum dominance over the entire world. The realists didn't agree. Now, as this debate was hotting up in 1997, in the Washington Post, an article appeared, which I'd like to quote a paragraph from. A 50-strong group of America's great and good, including a posse of former ambassadors, arms control negotiators, and foreign affairs experts, issued an open letter to President Bill Clinton yesterday, setting out strong objections to the enlargement of NATO. They argued that incorporating Central European states with serious border and national minority problems would dilute NATO's core mission, strain decision-making processes, and entangle the alliance in territorial disputes unrelated to the transatlantic security. Signatories to yesterday's open letter come from both ends of the political spectrum. This open letter was signed by some of the biggest names in the US foreign policy. All of these anti-communist hawks were publicly warning President Clinton to not expand NATO. In 1997, George Kennan described NATO expansion as, quote, the most fateful era of American foreign policy in the entire post-Cold War era, warning that it would inflame Russian nationalism, empower hardliners, and inevitably precipitate conflict along Russia's borders. Jack Matlock was Russia's ambassador to Moscow during the Cold War. He said, if you exclude Russia from an expanding alliance, it will necessarily be perceived as being against them. A year later, Kennan told the New York Times, NATO expansion is the beginning of a new Cold War. This is 1997. It's a tragic mistake. There's no reason for this whatsoever. Our differences during the Cold War were with the Soviet communist regime. And now we are turning our backs on the people who mounted the greatest bloodless coup in history to remove that regime. Of course, there's going to be a bad reaction from Russia. And then the NATO expanders will say, oh, well, of course, we always told you that's how the Russians are. So there are so many smart guys against NATO expansion. Why did NATO expand? Bruce Jackson did it. No one in this room's heard of Bruce Jackson. Let me tell you about Bruce Jackson. He was the president of a little lobbying organisation called US Committee on NATO Expansion. It was launched in 1996. That was Bruce's after-hour job. What was Bruce's real job? Oh, he was just the vice president of strategy and planning at Lockheed Martin, the largest defence contractor in the world. Little known, Bruce Jackson wrote the NATO expansion policy, and he convinced Clinton and the Republicans to back the NATO expansion. Lockheed Martin and the other defence contractors loved expansion because when some new nation joins NATO, they had to plug in their defence forces and get all the NATO equipment. They had to buy a ton of stuff from people like Lockheed Martin. So NATO expansion began in 1991. Czech Republic, Hungary and Poland joined. 2004, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia and Slovenia. And in 2008, NATO officially invited Ukraine and Georgia to become a part of NATO, to put them on a pathway. But just before that 2008 decision, the US ambassador in Moscow and future CIA director William Burns wrote to DC, and he said, no Russian leader could stand idly by in the face of NATO steps or membership of Ukraine. It would be a hostile act towards Russia. Russia had to view continued eastward expansion of NATO, particularly to Ukraine and Georgia, as a potential military threat. So the Russians were confused and alarmed. All the Russians were against expansion, even Gorbachev, who the West loved. On 3 occasions, Yeltsin and Putin had publicly said, hey, look, well, why don't we join NATO? That was a good idea. If NATO has to exist, let's get Russia in the tent so at least we don't have to have a war. But no. NATO needs an enemy. The day after 9/11, Putin phoned Bush and he said, look, you've got a blank check to use Russian airspace to knock over the Taliban in Afghanistan. Then, of course, at the same time this is happening, NATO expansion, there's all these colour revolutions going on, all in Russia's border, all these CIA operations that look like it was a spontaneous uprising, but in fact it was the CIA trying to knock over Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia. Now, the new after 2014, which I think Ross is going to talk more about, one of the very first things the new Ukrainian government did was, well, they said they're going to ban speaking Russian in all of Ukraine. The Russian Ukrainians left. So anyway, look, Russia's part of Europe. Russia's a Christian country. Russia wants to be our friend. And what NATO has done, besides risking World War III, it's made Russia and China best friends. That's not good for anyone.
Drew Pavlu. Thank you. I will start just quickly with some of the common talking points. For example, the Ukrainian Nazi stuff. Zelensky's family fought for the Soviet Union. In fact, the vast majority of Ukrainians fought for the Soviet Union in World War II. Why does NATO exist? I mean, the Poles do not want to be under Russian domination. Ruddick talks about, for example, how many times has Russia been invaded from the West? I mean, how many times has Russia invaded Eastern Europe from the East? I mean, it's countless times in the past couple hundred years, and the people of Eastern Europe do not want to live as satellite states. Unfortunately, much of Eastern Europe endured being Russian vassal states, satellite states throughout much of the Cold War. The Poles had to have a revolution to overthrow the Russians, and this is fundamentally why Eastern Europe was banging down the door to try join NATO, because they did not want to ever come back under Russian domination. And since they joined NATO, Russia has not even so much as fired a shot in the direction of a NATO country. So every country that has joined NATO was actually protected from Russia. We talk about, for example, Russia had this great democratic revolution. In fact, there was actually no real power transition inside Russia. Putin was a KGB hardliner. He was literally the head of the KGB before Yeltsin installed him in the presidential palace. There's basically no political transition inside Russia. There's no transfer of power whatsoever. The color revolutions that he talks about as being CIA plots, these are just peoples across Eastern Europe wanting to run their own governments rather than actually being controlled by Russia. So multiple Ukrainian leaders have basically been bribed by Russia. Some were poisoned after independence. Poroshenko, I think, was poisoned quite brutally. Yeah, and Yanukovych, the man who fled to Russia during the Euromaidan revolution. There was supposed to be peace negotiations between the protesters and Yanukovych, and they've got to hold new elections. Then Yanukovych decided that he was going to flee to Russia. And this was a constitutionally unprecedented situation in Ukrainian history where the serving president of the country has actually fled to a neighboring hostile country. Yanukovych, when they overthrew him, the protesters went to his country estate and they found that he literally had gold-plated toilets. So the corruption within the pro-Russian oligopoly, the the pro-Russian business elite in Ukraine was just shocking to behold. Now, I want to focus mainly on the statement that John Ruddock made, where he said Russia's actually been remarkably restrained since the end of the Cold War. So I went to Ukraine in March. I went with Rob, actually. We went to Kherson and we went to Dobropilya in the Donbass. So in Kherson, I walked through an area that has been called the red zone. Essentially what happened was the Russian Telegram bloggers declared the entire downtown area of Kherson to be a free fire zone. They basically said that any Ukrainian in that zone, whether they be old babushka grandmas, anybody really, would be considered a military target. Any vehicle traffic in that zone would be considered military targets. 2 days before we went to Kherson, the Russians dropped a grenade from a drone on a bus filled with civilians. A bunch of old grandmas had their limbs, their arms and legs blown off, ripped off, and they bled out to death. We talk about, it's very easy to talk about war in very abstract and theoretical terms. The reality is when they're dropping these grenades on people with the drones in Kherson, people's arms and legs are being ripped off. I walked through the downtown area. It was basically like something out of I Am Legend. There was essentially no human habitation. As you got closer to the river, it was basically a death zone. You would see maybe a stray cat here or there. Every single shop was boarded up. Essentially, the Russians took control of Kherson at the start of the war. And when the Ukrainians took back Kherson, they basically decided to make the city uninhabitable for human life. And so that was the strategy behind what they call the human safari. If you can literally go onto multiple Russian Telegram channels right now. Anyone with Telegram can go look at this. It's in Russian, but you can just read the translation. They call the Ukrainians hohols. That's their ethnic slur for Ukrainians. And they gloat. They gleefully gloat about the human safari, they call it, where they basically just hunt people through the streets with the drones and drop grenades on them. And when we were there, the local inhabitants estimated that about 10 to 15 people were being killed a day by the human safari. Now, we talk about Russia's great restraint. Now, the human safari is a real thing. You can literally go and watch it on Russian Telegram right now. They call it the human safari. They laugh about it. They say, look, we're killing the hohols. This woman in the audience is kind of quizzically looking at me. I mean, I literally was there. I was there 6 months ago. I was literally there. I talked to people on the ground. There's 10 to 15 people being killed in Kherson every single day by the Russian human safari, which you can watch on Telegram. We then went to Dobropilya in the Donbass. The Dobropilya is a very poor town. It's essentially a post-industrial mining town. It's very poor by Australian standards. Basically, all the housing stock is Soviet. And we walked to a Khrushchevka. These are basically apartment blocks that were made in the 60s. And they're crumbling down. Yet in these towers, you've got entire multi-generational families basically crammed inside the Khrushchevkas. We were there one day after Russia hit one of these Khrushchevkas with a ballistic missile, an Iskander ballistic missile. They then waited for first responders to come, and they used a double tap strike. So they waited for the ambulances and the firefighters to come, and then they did a double tap. And you could literally walk for 500 meters in a square direction all around. You could see the shrapnel indentations on every single wall in the surrounding vicinity. Shrapnel indentations about the size of, grapefruits basically. Essentially, they then drop cluster munitions on the first responders, and anybody nearby is just completely eviscerated. You can't survive that. There's superheated chunks of flying metal, flying at supersonic speeds. Anybody nearby, firefighters, ambulances, just eviscerated. So we talk about the restraint of Russia. We talk about, well, is NATO really responsible for this war? I was there in the Donbass. I was there in Kherson. I saw firsthand there is literally zero Russian restraint. They are just basically carrying out a campaign of terrorism against the Ukrainian people. The goal of the campaign, the goal of the attacks in Dobropilya, the goal of the attacks in Kherson were basically to empty the cities of civilians. They want to basically make them uninhabitable. They want to make the Ukrainian population flee. Part of their long-term strategy in the war is to basically make Ukraine a failed state. That's why they target the energy infrastructure. That's why they try so hard to basically make Ukraine an uninhabitable country. And so I walked through that apartment block one day after it was hit. There was still acrid smoke in the air. There were little kids lined up nearby getting aid from, I think it was the UN, basically boarding up the windows with balsa wood. I walked through the apartment building because it was just open. And I literally walked through some of these apartments that were literally just eviscerated. Completely, nothing is left. Nothing is left at all. Just completely burned to a crisp. And there were dozens of people probably massacred in this attack on Dobropilya. In the few apartments on the top floors that weren't completely burnt to shreds, you could actually see some of the Orthodox Christian icons still hanging on the walls. And so, you know, Ruddock says this is a great Christian country. They're slaughtering European Christians. They use Chechen Islamist rebels to slaughter Ukrainian Christians and ethnically cleanse European Christians in places like Mariupol. I can't see how any single conservative could ever see Russia as a civilizational ally. This is basically a very proud third worldist state. They hate the West. They are slaughtering and ethnically cleansing European Christians as we speak. And I walked through these apartment blocks where the few apartments still not burnt to a crisp. You could see the Orthodox icons in the windows. This is the reality of what they're doing. I saw it with my own eyes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting characterisation. Russia is a third world.
All right, let me just.
Not third worldist. Ideologically third worldist. I'm not calling it third world.
Okay, well,
Although in large parts of it, it is quite.
all right.
It's a pretty poor country. 30% don't have.
Mate,
Plumbing.
I'm happy for you to go back and amend all the factual errors. I'm afraid the Parliament House security would be begging to go home.
Sure.
You know, Russia is a third world East country that hates the West. Okay, well, Russia gave us Tchaikovsky, a bloke named Leo Tolstoy. Tchaikovsky gave us the brothers Karamazov. Tchaikovsky and Mendeleev gave us the periodic table of elements.
They did Tolstoy so they can slaughter Ukraine.
One at a time, brother. One at a time. The periodic table of elements hates the West. Okay. Russia has won 5 Nobel Peace Prizes for physics. Russia is one of 3 states in the world with a genuine space program. In critical moments in US history, Russia has been on the side of the United States. And this sort of bitter grudge that the United Kingdom, MI6, carries towards Russia, like Gollum with his precious down in the cave, we hate Russia, we hate Russia. When George III went to the Tsar and said, "Oh, mate, we need your help to crush the rebellion in America." Catherine the Great said, "Well, I'm sorry, George, but I'm actually on the side of the colonists. I think they've got a right to their own country. We will not be participating. We will maintain neutrality." So while Great Britain was trying to crush the nation state of the US, Russia was on their side. When we get to the Civil War, you know, we talk about Abraham Lincoln at the critical moment where the battle is in the balance. You've got Britain there rapidly building more ships for the Confederacy because they wanted the slave-made cotton and they wanted to keep America divided. But the Tsar sent 2 squadrons, one from the Atlantic, one from the Pacific. They didn't fire a shot. Classic, classy Russian diplomacy. They just sailed around the joint, letting the Confederates know that if necessary, they had support. And, you know, this allegation from Rob that Russia has made no efforts to solve the problems, I'm sorry. As John Ruddock mentioned, when the Berlin Wall came down, the rationale for NATO came down with it. The Warsaw Pact dissolved, but this bureaucracy has persisted as a paspalum weed, nothing more powerful than a bureaucracy hooked up to the drip of automatic funds transfer. The US had 4 options. They could turn NATO into a little museum on the high street where military historians could drop in on their holidays and pore over old documents, which would have been the right thing to do. Secondly, they could have said, I don't know, well, look, we're going to leave NATO in place, but we're going to keep our promise not to expand it east. We're just going to leave it there. We're going to let the bureaucrats sort of trouser their grimy sort of tax payments. We're going to let the sort of arms contracts continue to be exchanged through the BMWs and the Audis swanning in and out of the car park in the Taj Mahal, I think one of the biggest buildings in Europe. But we're not going to go east. That would have worked. Could have worked. Plausible. Thirdly, as John Ruddock said, they could have said, all right, we're going to allow NATO to grow if necessary, but we're going to invite Russia to join. And by that means, we will completely defang the operation as far as destabilising the whole of Eastern Europe is concerned. But there was a fourth option. That was, let the beast grow. Let the dog off the chain. Let the Alsatian go hard, son. And so what the US did, not only did they say, we are going to leave the fangs on and turbocharge the Alsatian, they adopted a doctrine which the US Defense Department published in 2001 called full spectrum dominance. And that doctrine required the US to be able to operate with its partners anywhere in the world, on the land, in the ocean, in the air, in space, and in cyberspace, including full psychological dominance of the world. So the consequences of this decision were ineluctable, inevitable, predictable, obvious to, the dumbest kid in the remedial class, except for Drew Pavlu. And, Rob says it's a lie that NATO caused this thing. Okay, mate. Well, General Patrick Moynihan, US Senator, we have no idea what we're getting into. William Perry, former US Secretary of Defense, we need to keep moving forward with Russia. NATO enlargement shoves us into reverse. Thomas Friedman, NATO expansion is the most ill-conceived project of the post-Cold War era.
Oh, Thomas Friedman.
William Burns, hostility to early NATO expansion is almost universally felt across the domestic spectrum here as a diplomat in Moscow. Robert Gates, former CIA director. Gates criticised NATO expansion, saying that it contributed to Russian perceptions of betrayal, fueling tensions. These guys, as John Ruddock said in 97, they spelt out what was obvious from this series of commitments. One, it would weaken American people's support for NATO. Two, it would distract NATO from its core mission. Three, it had an unknown cost, which we didn't know it could fund. Four, it would commit the US to security guarantees with countries of uneven democratic history, of internal domestic strife and of border disputes. And five, they said it will force us back into the Cold War that we've just given 2 generations of blood and treasure to end. And that's exactly what it's done. And if we want to talk about, you say, the president of Ukraine fled. Okay, the foreign minister of Estonia was a member of the working group to establish what happened at Maidan Square. And this bastard, in a leaked phone call, says, this is what he says. The snipers in Maidan Square who were killing police and civilians were from our people. From our people. Okay, so he was on the working group. Now, I don't know what BAE Systems has to say about it. I mean, they did get busted in a £600 million bribe scandal, buying the biggest, export of jets and missiles to Saudi Arabia, which the British Office of Major Fraud was investigating until Tony Blair said, mate, let's drop this investigation. It's not good for our national security arrangement. But BAE Systems was entitled to their opinion.
Rob was like in middle school.
As the next guy. What I just say to you, all of the colour revolutions, right? That's like an IKEA module. You just buy it straight off the shelf. Okay, you get the Pentagon, you get the CIA, you get the State Department, you get George fucking Soros, you get USA splashing a few billion here and there. You get, who is the single biggest donor to the Clinton Foundation? It's 182 sovereign states in the UN. The single biggest donor. It's not Bahrain, it's not Saudi Arabia, it's Ukraine. The symbol of this racket is Hunter Biden and 50 US intelligence officers who said his laptop is Russian misinformation.
All right, wrap it up there.
Well,
Insane but entertaining.
thank you all. That's given us a lot to think about. The question of who is more responsible for the war in Ukraine, the Kremlin or the White House. Some may still be on the fence, but I'm sure both the Kremlin and the White House were watching our debate very carefully. We will now move on to some questions from the audience. We've got an online sort of situation going on as well. There's a bloke on Twitter by the name of Chris Discoveries. It's like Discoveries, but his name's Chris. It's quite clever wordplay. He'll be taking questions as well, and we're going to get them passed on, and then we can also just pass around the microphone to anybody who's here and has questions they'd like to ask a member of the panel. So, brilliant. Thank you very much, Pavlu.
I was wondering from the libertarian side if you could shed some light on that famous leaked phone call of Victoria Nuland talking to.
I'm going to let Victoria Nuland answer your question. Because this is the example of US NATO respect for Ukraine sovereignty.
Which the Russians really respect.
It's instructive. I think we'll be able to. 4th of February 2000.
I think we're in play. The Klitschko piece is obviously the complicated electron here, especially the announcement of him as deputy prime minister. And you've seen some of my notes on the troubles in the marriage right now. So we're trying to get a read really fast on where he is on this stuff. But I think your argument to him, which you'll need to make, I think that's the next phone call we want to set up, is exactly the one you made to Jan today. I'm glad you sort of put him on the spot on where he fits in this scenario. And I'm very glad he said what he said in response.
Good. So I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay, hit pause. Okay, this is United States respect for Ukrainian sovereignty. Okay, this is the Undersecretary of State talking to the US ambassador in Ukraine at the end of January in 2014, right before, in the middle of the moment where the president is negotiating a deal with Europe for early elections, a government of national unity, maintain neutrality, and here we have Victoria Nuland choosing the cabinet of Ukraine right before the snipers went into action.
Now, I think we might have a 30-second cap. What we might do is we might keep people seated. We'll bring the roving mic back up to the table, and then at 30 seconds we might cut it off.
I might respond to that, noting that it's pretty common for the embassy in a country to have a view on governments during transition. But I will point out that there was an election pretty soon afterwards, and Petro Poroshenko won it. The party of the regions lost it. The people, after the dismissal of Gough Whitlam, had a chance to render their verdict on Maidan and decisively made the decision never to trust Russia again, because they had sent him packing twice in the last 10 years. Noting that Volodymyr Zelensky then defeated Poroshenko, representing Eastern Ukraine, as the peace candidate, who was then invaded.
Just fallen victim to the new 30-second.
Can I say one brief thing as well? I just want to say, it doesn't necessarily follow from Victoria Nuland and the US Embassy having a conversation about Ukrainian politics that, wow, Ukrainian grandmas in the year 2025 should have grenades dropped on them in Kherson by Russia. Does it make sense to anyone? How that follows logically?
Right, let's get some more questions.
All right, another question. Let's.
Yeah. Otherwise, they won't hear it online.
Just a question for the panel. I would like to know how do you think about the conflict in Gaza, and how do you think it's shaped your geopolitical worldview in relation to the conflict in Ukraine?
John, why don't you answer that one?
Well, look, I don't think they're connected. We really just want to stick with Ukraine. It hasn't changed. My view on Gaza has changed, but my view on Ukraine has been unchanged for a long time. I don't see them as being connected.
A view from the other side?
I'll say very briefly, the way I look at it, Russia supports Iran. They're very close, and Iran supports Hamas. And the second October 7 happened, Russia was promoting a lot of propaganda narratives and cheering on the massacre. So there is a broad sort of third worldist front against the West, and it's sort of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And that's how I see things.
Should we go to another Another person in the audience, are there any more questions?
Thank you. Just so I understand your position, Drew, what I gathered from your speech is that you believe the motivations of Russia are driven out of like this imperialistic
Yes.
desire to conquer its neighbors.
Yes.
So understanding that context, you believe NATO is to keep Russia in check, and that's its purpose and existence. So in acknowledging that, why is Turkey part of Russia, part of NATO, sorry?
Why is Turkey part of NATO? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Turkey is part of NATO. It obviously joined NATO during the Cold War to basically try, because they felt threatened by the Soviet Union. If you look at Turkey's relationship with Russia today, they basically play a both sides type of game. Obviously, Turkey is inside NATO, but at the same time, Turkey hosts a lot of trade with Russia. They talk with Russia very closely. Erdogan plays a very sophisticated diplomatic game. I want to know though, like your question, I guess you're trying to poke a hole at my idea that NATO is there to check Russia. How does Turkey's membership in NATO, how is that supposed to link together?
And that's the
yeah. I'm wondering if you could
throw back to the audience.
Look, it was an innocent, naive question.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
What your understanding of why Turkey's part of NATO?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, they joined it. They joined in the Cold War as part of. They felt threatened by the Soviet Union.
Perhaps we open to the other side. Ross, do you have any thoughts to add on that?
Oh, look, I'm just going to say in relation to Turkey, there is this obvious, inconsistency in, Turkey, which has been guilty of extraordinary oppression against the Kurds, against its own minorities.
The Cypriots?
And Turkey, which has sponsored, violence and jihadism, for example, in Syria and elsewhere, but it can qualify. I just say that Recep Erdogan does get credit for after the invasion took place in 2022. We should admit and acknowledge that in December 2021, Russia put on the table two comprehensive draft security agreements, one of Russia-US, one of Russia-NATO members, specifically with the objective of avoiding a military confrontation. And the only fundamental requirement of both was that Ukraine must maintain neutrality and not expand NATO. But the aggressive, belligerent NATO Alsatian said, no, we must be free to expand no matter what.
I'm going to have to wrap it up there, I'm afraid.
Okay, I just want to say, but Turkey did then broker a deal, which was almost, according to the Ukraine negotiators, they were almost ready to sign.
And you're going to have to look it up on YouTube or Wikipedia, I'm afraid, because that's the end of that. So let's get some more questions. We might throw this out to this Chris Scovery's X stream. Does somebody have that handy? I actually don't have
that. Or I've got also. It's also my YouTube stream. There are some comments I think as well. If anyone's watching live,
largely abuse, Drew.
What do you say?
Yes, no, I don't think there's a great deal on that.
Oh, look, Chris. If Chris has them, then
do you have that? Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Pick anything you like.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Swipe through.
Right. Okay. Let's have a think here.
Skip the job days.
Some of this, yeah, I might do that actually.
Skip the job days.
Yeah.
Yes, we have some sort of freewheeling commentary on the nature of the rotten nature of Western democracy. I'm not sure there's actually a question in here.
Well, I'd like to ask, while we're getting a question from online, I would like to ask our two friends here. Your whole thesis is built around the idea that the Russians are inherently expansionist. They just can't help themselves. So if that's true...
Well, they're the largest country on earth for a reason.
Why did both Yeltsin and Putin on 3 occasions publicly say, hey, can we join NATO to end the tension? Why, if they're expansionist, why on earth would they want to become a member of NATO? Don't you think that blows up your entire foundation?
No, because if you're inside NATO, you can wreck the place. Yeah, like That's a strictly dominant strategy if you're Russian. You get inside, you make a mess of it, just like they do at the
blind.
United Nations.
This is just blind. This is crazy stuff.
No.
They wanted to join NATO to
You asked me a
Okay.
question. Can I answer?
All right, good question. Good question. Should China be able to join NATO, and then they have access to all our military plans, and they have access to all America's, military equipment, backdoors into all this military equipment? I mean, you wouldn't want China to join NATO, I assume.
Well, I don't want NATO to exist, but yeah, I would want China to join NATO.
Well, I also point out that NATO is actually not a party to the conflict, and President Zelensky wasn't applying to join. Right? He was the peace candidate. Right? He defeated the Maidan president in an election based entirely on anti-corruption and neutrality, and he got invaded for it.
No, I'm not. I don't believe that's.
That is the case. Have you seen the footage of him fighting with the frontline troops in the Donbass prior to the invasion in 2022? He literally campaigned as the peace candidate.
The
He said he
peace
wanted
candidate,
peace.
whose very first act was to make it a crime to speak Russian.
It's not a crime to speak Russian. He speaks Russian himself. I speak Russian in Ukraine.
25% of his population are Russian Orthodox, and he knew. And he said, "We're gonna boot Russia out of Crimea."
So Anna, Rob's partner Anna, speaks.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
step up as
A Ukrainian.
A Ukrainian, a Russian-speaking Ukrainian, and I can still speak freely in my own country in the language I choose, whether it's Ukrainian,
It's more about
Russian, or
government
English.
government documents.
Zelensky campaigned in Russian.
Zelensky, he didn't say he's going to ban the language. He said he's going to ban it from
You
the
just said
government.
that. You just said that he was going to ban the language.
Well, he meant to say from the government. It was going to be like it wasn't going to be bilingual anymore. It was going to be in. Now, is that true?
That is true, but
There you go.
I don't see it as a problem.
You don't think that was
John, I might
provocative?
jump in. Do you think that?
Provocative to Ukrainians who speak Ukrainian and
Russian
Russian.
Ukrainians.
Do you think that moving from official bilingualism to monolingualism justifies an invasion?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't. But if 14,000 Russian-speaking Ukrainians between 2014 and 2022, 14,000 died from Ukrainians, overwhelmingly led by the Azov Nazi insignia brigade. And once Zelensky had isolated the Russian speakers as second-class citizens, he could then just lean back and let the Azov battalion do your worst. 14,000 dead, and 3,000 of them children.
Sorry, that's very easy.
Civilians, and you had 1.5 million. Why was there 1.5 million refugees?
That's very easy to
Why
observe. Never been to Ukraine.
Ross, I would stress that we're not seeking to cross-examine members of the audience.
To be fair, Adam, jump in.
I will ask Rob on that note. How do you justify the existence and the funding of the Azov Brigade in eastern Ukraine? They are known to have links to Nazi ideology.
Salute Azov.
In what way? In what way does that affect your view of the conflict?
I'll say this: that if they're Nazis, they're fighting for a Jewish president, and until quite recently, a Muslim defense minister. So they're probably the worst Nazis in the world, right? They're football hooligans who volunteered to fight. They were the first
I love
volunteers.
swastikas.
So do the Russians.
Their grandfathers were Waffen SS.
There were more Russians in the Waffen SS than Ukrainians.
The deputy to Wagner, Utkin, who was killed in the.
What do you think Wagner Group means? Do you think there's nothing German in that?
Yeah. So the deputy of the Wagner Group, Utkin, who was killed in the bomb attack on that plane with Prigozhin, he had SS tattoos on his collarbones, and he was the head of the Wagner. He was the head of the Wagner military campaign for Russia in Bakhmut.
Look, MSNBC, New York Post, The Guardian, everyone is sort of saying, what do we do about Ukraine's Nazi problem? And the big fear is that it will be used by the sort of Russian sympathizers or Russian propaganda. But everyone is saying, look, yeah, we admit from the very foundation of the joint, its key Banderist leaders have all had very, very close associations with the Nazis. We don't say every Ukrainian is a Nazi sympathizer, but every rational voice admits that Ukraine has a Nazi problem, a big Nazi problem. And you can imagine when the Soviet Union gave 27 million, 10 million of them Russians, to destroy Nazism in Europe, they don't really appreciate the re-emergence of Nazi insignia, Azov battalions marching through the Donbass, executing people and causing an exodus of 1.5 million people that Russia has to deal with.
6 million people have left Ukraine since Russia's invasion in
Continuing on that
2022.
I'm going to jump in here. Drew, what are do you believe fundamentally that if NATO didn't exist, this would have happened differently? If NATO didn't exist, would Russia have expanded?
If NATO didn't exist, they would still invade Ukraine. If you watch Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson, if you watch Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson, which is actually really important historical document because you can actually you can actually see into the mindset of Putin. So Tucker continually, about 15 times, brought up NATO and NATO expansion. And yet, what did Putin do? He kept on bringing back, no. Let's talk about the great Vladimir. Let's talk about the history 1,000 years ago. Let's talk about Ukraine was never even a real country. Ukraine meant borderland in our language. He kept on going back to history 300, 400, 500 years ago. That's what you see, the imperial mindset of Putin. So if NATO didn't exist, if NATO expanded, NATO could be evaporate tomorrow.
There
Still be
haven't
invaded.
been Russian incursions into, say, Kazakhstan, in some of the former Soviet states in the
Yeah,
east.
Chechnya wasn't a NATO.
Yeah,
wasn't
good
a
point.
NATO candidate, and they still invaded them. Right?
Well, hang on. You guys love bombing Islamic terrorists, jihadi terrorists. You love it. So they had a problem there with genuine Islamic
And now they're
terrorism.
using them to invade Ukraine. They're a Chechen craze. You think
Chechenya's
Ukraine's got
been
a
at peace
Nazi
now for 20
problem?
years.
What about
That's good.
Chechen
That's good.
friggin' Muslim extremists invading Europe alongside?
This is a
Bolshevik
rich theme for further discussion, but I hear we have another question from the audience.
Yeah,
So
sure.
Can anybody speak to the Minsk agreement?
The Minsk.
sorry, I think we've actually got one behind you, but we might do you next.
One of the ways I think to distill these kind of things is to imagine that the shoe's on the other foot. I think that removes some of our bias. So let's imagine that Mexico or Canada had joined the Warsaw Pact, or even more recently, if they joined BRICS. What do you think the United States would do? Do you think they tolerate that? And keep in mind that we've had the Cuban Missile Crisis as an example already.
So I think the question is, I'm not entirely
Would
sure what the
America
question is.
invade Mexico if Mexico joined
The Warsaw Pact. Yeah.
Rob, do you want to take us away on that?
Somebody else answer it. I don't want to answer.
No,
There's a little thing called the Cuban Missile Crisis. They exactly what the questioner has just explained is it happened in 1962. The US absolutely came down like a ton of bricks on Cuba and said, no, you're in our neighborhood. We're not putting up with a Soviet nuclear presence right here.
Was anyone proposing to put NATO nuclear weapons into Kiev?
Well,
No.
look, there's been a massive build-up on about 6,000 miles of Russia's border, from Estonia all the way down. So,
Yeah, but the troops are only coming one way.
No, well, I'm sorry, but Ukraine membership of NATO has been a fundamental sticking point in the negotiations.
It wasn't the
and
policy of President Zelensky to join NATO.
Well, NATO insisted when
Germany and France
Russia
didn't want to allow
Russia
them in.
said our conditions are simple. We want Ukraine neutrality, and we want no further eastward expansion of NATO, including into Ukraine. Stoltenberg told Putin it was none of his business where NATO expanded to.
Germany.
And so I just say, if you want to live, and he said NATO will always practice an open door to any country that wants to join. Putin had told the whole world, if you, like Soviet Union, wanted to put missiles in Cuba, and JFK said, listen, sunshine, there is no chance you're putting missiles in Cuba. And we will have a military confrontation if you do. And Putin told that to the world in his press conference in December
Ross, this
2019.
is characteristically long.
I'm sure Russia today will have
It's
the other
always been a red line from the very
I'll
beginning.
allow a response, Drew.
Very quickly, the reality is that Germany and France within NATO were massive impediments to Ukraine joining NATO. They never wanted Ukraine
All
inside
right, we might
NATO.
have to wrap this one up there because I believe we have a few additional questions from the audience.
It was
I think
never
you were
happening.
halfway
It was
through your
never on the
question
table.
before I cut you off.
I just wanted to ask about the Minsk agreement and how do you guys know about it?
Yeah, sure.
Can you explain it to us and how that affects what's going on?
Yeah,
and how it's
So under the Minsk agreement, a whole range of countries guaranteed Ukraine's full sovereignty, including Crimea, in exchange for them giving up their nuclear weapons, including the United States.
Hang on. That's the agreement in the early 90s.
That's Minsk.
Okay. I think she's talking about Minsk 1 and 2, which is in 2014, 2015.
You're talking about the 2014 agreement? Yeah.
John, do you want to take it? Do you want to elaborate on that?
I'm happy. I didn't want to interrupt, but if you want to talk about.
Well, I mean, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from the entire world, which were never honoured.
And John Mearsheimer warned them not to do that. And so John Mearsheimer was right about that. So you can't call it. Look, the lady's asking about Minsk 1 and 2, which was what had happened is the CIA organised a revolution, a coup, they overthrew the democratic leader of Ukraine.
and then as Ross said, they were prepared to shoot their own people and blame it on the.
I mean, come on, that's just nonsense. That's just nonsense.
Yeah, let me finish. Hang on, I haven't
I
interrupted you.
agreed to do this
Hang on,
panel. No, I want to say something. I want to say something about this because I agreed to do this panel under the agreement that we would hash out an argument in good faith in the public sphere, and that as a result of that, people would have a chance to change their minds, and you could challenge me to change mine. But the idea that Ukrainian protesters were shooting themselves in 2014 is so outrageous that I can't stand on the same panel with you if you're going to tell me that.
I'll give you a direct quote. Okay, they held a fact-finding mission into what happened in Ukraine, which had multiple members of it at the time. There is a leaked phone conversation which you can find on YouTube. It has never been denied by either side. The Foreign Minister of Estonia was a member of the fact-finding mission. In a private conversation with EU's Chief of Foreign Affairs, he said the snipers in Maidan Square who were killing policemen and civilians were from our people.
They were Ukrainian.
And you're getting upset
SBU
because the truth hurts.
No, it's bullshit.
Ukrainian pro-Russian.
The whole objective was to support the protest, to turn the protest into a riot, and then the riot into a revolution. In order to turn the protest from a protest to a riot, the snipers shot both sides.
Even before the snipers, Yanukovych made the decision on the first couple nights of the Euromaidan to send riot police in to bash up the kids. So if you want to talk about what escalated the violence in Euromaidan, it came from Yanukovych every single time and time again.
That's just not
Ross, I might direct the question. Is it your position that this justifies an invasion, or that an invasion was not in some sense a breach of international law in response to this? Or is it simply that this has a sort of causal link to the Russian invasion?
I say that the invasion is the absolute inevitable result of the US adopting full spectrum dominance as its policy and working on a sustained pattern over 2 decades to surround and encircle Russia and have NATO weapon systems pointing at Moscow and St. Petersburg. So yes, after 14,000 Russian-speaking casualties and 1.5 million refugees from the Donbass, yes, it is justified.
It's justified.
Absolutely.
6 million people have fled Ukraine since the invasion in 2022. Yeah, more than 1 million dead. Yeah. And you go, the Donbass. And yet what Russia has done since 2022 is infinitely more destructive and has killed so many more people than the localized conflict in the Donbass.
Okay, let me just read. I want to give you the Ukraine perspective on who's to blame. Okay, so this is
the people that live
David Arakamia, lead Ukraine negotiator, who is working with Erdogan in Istanbul.
I'm aware of the
he
deal.
says the war could have ended in the spring of 2022 if Ukraine had agreed to neutrality. Russia's goal was to put pressure on us so that we would be neutral. This was the main thing for them. They were ready to end the war if we accept neutrality. Russia was ready to end the war, according to the Ukraine negotiator.
I'll allow a final comment, and then I think we've got one more question.
On a point of fact, the reason it stopped was because the Russians were making the same demands they're making today, which is full territorial recognition, the complete demilitarization of Ukraine so it could never defend itself if it was invaded again, and neutrality. Right? Ukraine was willing to give way on neutrality, but not on completely demobilizing itself so it could be invaded again the next day.
Well, he said we were ready to give on 4 out of 6 until Boris Johnson arrived with £950 million from the World Bank and a bunch of new missile systems.
I am going to get another question from the audience.
That's the deal. Why are the Russians still offering it? We know what they're offering.
Gents, do we have... It could be quite awkward if you now don't have another question on the audience. Here we go. We have one over here. I think this might be our final question for the evening.
I think we should be able to do follow-up. Can I say one quick? I think we should be able to, as last thing, we should be able to ask one question each of each other. If we've got until 8.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a good idea. So just acknowledging the theory, Drew, because I want to understand your view a bit further. So John talked about the history prior to the war and his comment about, Russia's restraint was, prior to the war. then your commentary about, during the war and the horrifics of the war. I don't want to undermine that. It sounds like awful what you saw over there. But 3 days before the war started, Zelensky went to the Munich Security Conference, and he referenced actually the Budapest Memorandum, which was like an agreement in 1994. Ukraine would never resume nuclear operations just due to the fact it's on the border of Russia. At this conference, Zelensky said he wanted to revisit the Budapest Memorandum and perhaps revisit the non-nuclear stance of Ukraine. Do you think this perhaps might have alarmed Russia at all?
No.
Or they should just look the other way when you go to a security conference and you say you're resuming nuclear activity?
So he wasn't saying.
Yeah, pass it back up, please.
Okay.
Just we can't hear you until we hear.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
No worries. So Zelensky was not promising to pursue nuclear weapons development again. He was saying we should revisit the Budapest Memorandum in the sense that Ukraine willingly gave up all these nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from the world powers. And the world powers, including Russia promised they would recognize Crimea as Ukraine and the entirety of Ukrainian territorial sovereignty in exchange for Ukraine giving up those nuclear weapons. And not only had Russia invaded in 2014 and annexed Crimea and invaded half of the Donbass, they were then, at that point in time, mobilizing its entire army on the borders of Ukraine, threatening to try and annex the whole country. And Zelensky was saying, Russia signed an agreement with us that we will give up our nuclear weapons in exchange for Russia respecting our sovereignty. Maybe we should have a revisiting of that agreement for Russia to honor what it originally signed to Ukraine and to the world. I think that's very fair.
John, do you have anything to say to that?
No, I'd like to ask Rob a question since he lives in Ukraine. This country, Australia, was attacked on about 50 occasions by the Japanese in World War II, but we still managed to have two federal elections during World War II. Zelensky won't have an elections, and I understand, but this is not so much a hostile question, it's a genuine question. I keep hearing reports that opinion polling in Ukraine is extremely anti this war. Now, my question is, how reliable are these polls? Because it would be hard to poll people in a war zone. But the fact that he doesn't want to have an election does tell me that he's pretty unpopular. And he's just trying to continue the war, like somebody else, in Tel Aviv wants to continue the war because he's extremely unpopular. Now that's pretty. That's pretty evil.
Okay, I'll answer that. Firstly, my feeling on the ground is that Zelensky's gone through various periods of popularity and unpopularity during the conflict, and that during periods of extreme challenge, like this year and in 2022, his popularity goes up, and the country does rally around the flag. I would suggest that he's extremely popular right now. I don't personally believe he wants to run again.
But then what?
Hold on, let me answer the question. I'll get you can do your propaganda in a minute. I'll just explain the Ukrainian constitution for a second because it is slightly important. That under the state of emergency, the president has the power to engage conscription, right? On the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So Ukraine has a different constitution to Australia is the answer. The constitution was actually originally a Soviet draft, but it still exists and everyone follows it. Under the constitution, during a state of emergency, you cannot have simultaneous conscription, which is compulsion over the citizens, and an election.
Rob, do you think they should hold an election?
I believe
they can't under the constitution.
I can't under the constitution, right? They still have.
They have constitution,
but they can't though. Russia is continuing to fight in Ukraine.
Yeah,
so you can conscript someone to send them to war, but you can't have an election on that.
But they're not choosing
tyranny.
John, they're not choosing to continue the war. They're not choosing to continue the war.
The UK didn't have elections during
the Ukrainians.
Ross, perhaps I throw it to you.
There are different constitutions.
Really quickly, the Ukrainians would freeze the lines today if they could. They're not choosing to continue the war. Russia continues.
Do you think the legitimacy of this rests on whether or not these countries hold elections? Because I think there could be some serious doubt about the correctness and legitimacy of the Russian elections as well. Do you see the election point as being relevant in the determination?
Why do you? The Russian elections are conducted with international observers.
Wait, do you want me to give you
invited to attend, and every Russian polling booth, every single one has got 9 cameras operating on the count.
The integrity of the Russian
as well.
integrity of the Russian
one
voting booth.
camera goes down, they shut down the polling until the 9th camera is improved. Russian elections, and indeed you've got this extraordinary situation where Putin is giving Trump advice on how to improve transparency.
Would
in
you
US
say they're fairer than
elections
American
by
Australia?
removing voter mail-in votes?
Ross,
but
would you say
the
that
point
the American?
I would say is I think actually Robert's point is correct that after Zelensky's confrontation with Trump, it actually improved his domestic popularity ratings. But I just say once you have Victoria Nuland and Hillary Clinton choosing your whole cabinet,
Nuland's not
the question of national. Ukraine is not a sovereign state.
Right.
Ukraine is a client state
Right.
of the United States, and Boris, when the Ukrainians said we wish to end the war.
Ross, I've given you a bit of extra time on it because I gave some to the other side, but I think we might have to wrap it up. At that point.
Do you find that Russian
Drew,
election?
Drew,
No, really quickly though.
hang on. We will allow you to ask a question of this side in response to the one that's just been asked, but I might let you put your heads together for a moment and decide what that question's going to be.
But just really quickly, do you reckon the Russian elections are fairer than American elections?
Yeah, definitely.
Australian elections?
Yeah, but I say
Australian
to you, who do you say in the world is more genuinely domestically popular than Vladimir Putin? Who is a more popular domestic leader?
Yeah, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah. And I say
Right.
he's democratically elected. I've got a question. I've got a question. I know my question.
Allow the
Okay,
question
Ross,
back.
Okay, well, I mean, I've got 2 questions, one for each. And Drew, I say to you, if I don't want to be rude.
Oh, thank you, Ross. That's great.
That is a great relief, actually.
But I've
Thank
got
God.
to say to you, I find there's lots and lots of people like Boris Johnson who say, we want this war to keep going.
I don't want it to keep going. I would freeze the lines right now.
So long as it's not our blood being spilled. So
I
long
would
as
stop
the
the war
Slavs
today,
killing
I would.
each other. And so I just say to you, you're advocate, you're saying...
I don't want the war to continue.
You're saying that Ukraine should not accept the Russian deal. Therefore,
They
the
should
war
freeze the
must
lines right
go
now.
on. So I say to you, I respect Oscar Jenkins for the fact
He had a go.
that he at least said, okay,
Who's Oscar
if I believe in this war, I'll sign up for it.
Oh,
And I see Rob likes to wear the helmet, right? But you're happy for somebody else to take the risk.
Ross.
So I say, what would
I'm
it
answering-
take
I'm
for
answering-
you to sign
Okay,
up? Or do
okay,
you just want to,
okay,
from the background,
okay,
keep killing
okay,
each other?
okay. Firstly, Ross, I've demonstrated much more physical bravery than you because
All right,
I've literally,
all right.
I've literally
I'm
been.
not too sure about the tenor of this debate.
But very quickly, I literally did go to the Donbass. I literally was 10 kilometers back from
And
the
he had
front line.
dinner with Oscar Jenkins.
Did you shoot a gun?
I did shoot a gun, but at a gun range. Secondly,
Nobody wants him.
So you haven't been to the front line.
no. I
I
literally,
might actually question
the
relevance
Russians
of
were
this.
about 500
position,
meters.
The position of the war, whether it's justified or not, doesn't actually.
Okay,
change
okay.
whether
No,
the
I'm answering.
analysts have
I'm
literally
answering.
fought.
So in Kherson, the Russians were 800 meters away from me across the river.
All right.
Now, secondly,
we might
I'm
wrap it up.
answering. I'm answering the second part.
We might wrap that.
Let me answer the second part.
Can I ask? Perhaps, and I'd ask you to answer this as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
We'll run through one by one. What is the best case scenario from here on in? Is it on this side? Does it mean Moscow taking Kiev? And on this side, I would ask, does it mean a freezing of lines, or does it mean pushing the Russians back out of Crimea? So Ross, why don't we start with you? Just 5 seconds or fewer. If you can manage, what's the best case scenario from here on?
Well, you're not going to push Crimea out because 96% of the population of the Crimea status referendum said they wanted to be part of Russia.
Oh, so true. The true
But
what is the best case?
The best case is Ukraine agrees to neutrality. NATO agrees to no further eastern expansion. The disputed territories are resolved by democratic means.
With Russian soldiers in the
Hang on a
Donbass.
minute. Well, let's let him have his one.
And suitable security assurances are given by both sides.
John,
Okay, best case scenario is a partition in Ukraine.
Oh,
The Eastern-speaking the Russian speakers in the East should either have their own country or they can join Russia if they want to, and then we can shut down NATO, and then we can have a democratic uprising in Ukraine,
Mentally
and
ill.
we can all be peaceful. We can all be peaceful.
Massively mentally.
Drew,
I'm answering. Anna in the front row is a Russian speaker from the East, and she doesn't want that to happen. Now, let me quickly say,
there's been referendums. So
Oh, okay.
Now,
the
all right,
referendum.
When
there was
I'm going to have to ask you
okay,
to
I'll
answer
answer
this
it.
question.
When there was a real referendum in 1991, every single region in Ukraine voted for independence, even Crimea. That's what happens when you have a vote without Russian soldiers in the literal ballot box. Now, I'm responding to Ross here. Ross said, "Oh, you love the war. You want it to keep going." I would freeze the lines right now. Unfortunately, I accept the reality. It's very unjust, but I accept the reality that there is no ability right now to ever conquer Crimea. It's a sad reality. It's a very unjust thing because Russia conquered territory by force, and it's wrong what they did. Unfortunately, the realpolitik on the ground is they can't reconquer Crimea. I would freeze the lines right now.
All
right.
Let me respond.
Did anyone die in this great?
Yeah, they actually did.
Crimea?
Yeah, they actually
Now-
abducted a Crimean
Now,
Tatar
hang
off
on,
the
we're
street
getting
and
carried
gouged out his eyes.
That's how much resistance there was. 6.
No, they actually
Drew,
I'm
I'll
answering.
ask you to wrap this up.
Wrapping it up, they abducted a Crimean Tatar off the streets who protested and gouged out his eyes. I would say freeze the lines right now. I don't want the war to continue. The problem is that Russia won't stop until they actually try and annex Kiev. That's
Okay.
what Russia
And Rob, the final word. What is the best case scenario from here on out?
Well, the best case scenario is Crimea returns to Ukraine, right? That is, but whether I think that is a likely scenario is a different question. But the problem we're talking about, and I'll just you give an interesting foreign policy prescription to a country that I hope you would never accept as a federal member of the Australian Parliament if it was put on us, right?
Just hand over Tasmania to China.
Yeah. Just give that to China.
Some may argue that would be
Right?
true.
Like,
We're
he might.
Gentlemen,
Ross
I
would-
think we are
Ross
going to
would
wrap
love
it
that,
up.
actually.
It's now arrived.
Oh, last question. I do want to know, Rob.
No, actually, I think
very
we're
last
going
one.
to have to do it in
No,
your own
this is not
time on
China.
the way to the
Rob,
airport.
no,
I'm
no,
afraid.
last one. Ross, this is separate to Ukraine, but why do you like China so much? Because you're a libertarian. How do you support Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party?
All right, this is literally the last
Last
question
one.
of the evening. And there haven't any snide commentary from the other side.
I just acknowledge a question from online saying, how do you feel about a prisoner swap between Oscar Jenkins and the Aussie Cossack?
Good on him. I don't want Aussie Cossack in Australia. I would love to deport him. Please, let's do that prisoner swap ASAP.
Well, there we go. We've finished on agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming along. And thank you to our panelists for speaking. A mammoth effort.
The Russians don't want Aussie Cossack, unfortunately. We would all love it.
sure
We would all love it. We would swap Aussie Cossack for Oscar Jenkins tomorrow, but the Russians don't want it.
Drew, the debate is over. The lights are about to turn off. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Ross, it was entertaining at least. It was entertaining. That was good fun. See you, mate. Thanks so much, mate. Thank you. I'm gonna get to the airport.
Like you killed it, Joe. How was that?